And welcome to the Cradle Bytes, where we bring you the latest from West Asia. My name is Esteban Carrillo. I am the head of news for the Cradle. I'm joined by content creator and social media manager for the Cradle, Sima Itaim. And let's jump right into it. Lebanon. The war continues to expand. The massacres are multiplying. It seems like the country has been left to its own devices by the West, by its own allies in the West. We are seeing just last night a huge massacre in central Beirut, no longer in the southern suburbs, which at some point seemed to have gotten a bit normalized, I guess, to just attack the area of Dahie. Now we're seeing airstrikes in the middle of Beirut where, it wasn't, I think it was the first time since the 2006 war that this happened. At the border, we're seeing clashes intensify as well. The Israeli army has begun attacking even UN positions. There's desperation palpable. And we have some information from the field, actually, about how these clashes are developing.
Before we get into the battlefield briefly, this expansion of attacks, I wanted to remind our viewers, comes after Netanyahu addressed the Lebanese people in English, supposedly addressing them and telling them that now is their chance to rise up against Hezbollah and free Lebanon of Hezbollah. Otherwise, they will face what Gaza faced. So threatening genocide in the event that the Lebanese do not rise up and basically create a civil war.
Exactly.
So these
Civil war,
massacres that we're
genocide.
seeing, yeah. So the massacres that we're seeing now, as you said, they are outside the southern suburb of Beirut, Dahie, and they are not. Yesterday, the Israeli media came out and said this was an assassination attempt of Hezbollah member Wafid Safa. It looks now that it was just a massacre with no evacuation warning, and we've been seeing this in the past 4 days all over. At least 23 were killed yesterday, and and dozens injured. And then we also have, massacres in eastern Lebanon, in Zahle, in Wardani a few days ago. Also, there was displaced people in a hotel bombed and targeted.
Yeah.
So obviously, we
Yeah.
are no longer. We know what we're dealing with here. It's a war on Lebanon, and it's a war to pressure Hezbollah. It's the playbook. There's nothing new about it, and it's a very difficult situation. So this comes with this threat from Netanyahu, and we are seeing now that as the ground invasion continues for it's been almost 2 weeks now, actually,
Yeah.
these attempts to advance, that basically, the US has given up its facade of wanting a ceasefire and has actually come out and said that they want to see Hezbollah
Exactly.
weekend.
They're giving a green light to what's happening. That's apparent. That's transparent. They're even saying it.
Yeah, Matthew Miller said this week that we want to see Lebanon be able to break the grip that Hezbollah has had on the country, actually the stranglehold, and remove Hezbollah's veto over a president, because the U.S. wants to, of course, elect the president of its choosing. And Esteban, like who they want. They want the head of the Lebanese armed forces, most likely, who is fully backed by the U.S. But anyway, so yeah, just briefly to talk about, what's happening on the ground. Some of it is apparent, and other of the stuff I'm going to talk about is based on information that we received. But there are many indicators that Hezbollah has restored its operational command and control system. First of all, there are at least 200 rockets being fired per day from the south, and this is all. This is within the framework of command and control. This isn't a bunch of guys hiding in the bushes firing rockets at random.
Well, we're
This
seeing Haifa being coming under attack almost on a daily basis, and now Kiryat Shmona is essentially evacuated completely because the Israeli army cannot handle what's coming out
Yeah.
of the south of Lebanon.
Yeah, and there's a stability and consistency in the targets they choose, the nature and the type of the targets, and depending on the situation, where it is, what settlements, like you said, the main population centers in the north and towards the center, and the distribution of fire and rockets and the availability of targets also indicates that they have intelligence capabilities to produce these targets, whether it's on the ground in South Lebanon or Israeli cities, north and central. So, the command and control obviously is restored, and we don't need, Reuters to tell us that. Reuters came out and said all these obvious things, and then Hezbollah came out and denied that they have any sources to talk about.
Sources, right?
And there's the planting of explosive devices on the battlefield in the south and deploying new ambushes on different combat axes. This is all indication of the presence of a field command. Does not happen at random. These are field commanders making sound assessments and giving out orders and anticipating the enemy's movements to carry out the proportionate and effective measures in response. And even things like, if we saw the last speech of the Deputy Secretary General Naim Assem, during his speech, there was an unprecedented rocket strike on Krayot and Haifa, right in like coinciding with his speech. This kind of thing is an indication that there's someone who plans and decides and implements these things. It cannot be implemented without an effective command and control system.
And let me just cut in very quickly, Sima, to remind our viewers that this war started and continues to be an attempt at dismantle Hezbollah's command system. This is, from the pager attack, from the terror attack, to the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah, to the bombings of leaders up to last night, of Wafik Safa, or attempt on his life at the very least. This is what Israel has been trying to do, and it's obvious at this point that they have failed.
Correct. They have failed, and they need to produce the propaganda and incite civil strife as much as they can to counter that, to cover up for this failure. And that is a very realistic way of looking at it. That is not an optimistic way of looking at it. We're very aware of the difficult situation and the blows that have been dealt to the resistance, but this is the facts on the ground. Now, just a few general notes about the ground operation on the southern border. I want to also tell my viewers, whoever's listening to us right now, that just a couple days ago on September 30, Israel declared more military zones in Mtalli, Metula, and Misgav Am and Kfar Giladi on the border. And this is, in fact, an expulsion of any remaining residents of the north, not a repopulation as they say they aim to do. So they're actually expelling more residents by turning these areas into closed military zones. And there are 4 divisions now, the 91, 146 Reserve, 98 Elite, and 36 multi-area divisions in ongoing ground operations, which actually is an indication of Israeli concern, because each division is given an area of responsibility. Now, the area that Israel is operating in now in the south has been taken a beating for a year, since October 8th, when Hezbollah opened the front. And this is the first line of defense. So this is, for example, Yarun, the village of Yarun, where we saw them blow up a mosque, the mosque is only 150 meters away from the border. This area has been subjected to over 700 airstrikes by Israel since the start of the war. And thousands of raids and shelling. So these areas that they are so proudly operating from and creating propaganda from, this is still the first line of defense. And also they are struggling to advance, even though they're in a battered line of defense.
They're taking pictures, putting up flags, right? They're very good at putting out this type of propaganda.
Definitely. So that was in Marun al-Ras, actually. So I was talking about Yarun and where they destroyed the mosque. And Yarun is a destroyed village from months before they even went into South Lebanon. The Israelis entered it after its complete destruction to take pictures and destroy a mosque. And then there's Marun al-Ras, which is also, they haven't even seized the village of Marun al-Ras. They are at the outskirts of it. And so this video of them planting the flag is actually near the Iran Garden, or the Marun al-Ras Park, which is literally, this is like, I don't think it's more than 500 meters away from the border. And we saw a propaganda video of them destroying former Quds Force commander Qasem Soleimani's statue there. Now, this garden has also been targeted and destroyed for months. It was one of the first areas to be bombed after October 8th, and it's facing the border. And it's they took advantage actually of the presence of UNIFIL, of a UNIFIL position there, and you'll talk more about UNIFIL in a bit. A UNIFIL position there at the edge of the park's hill. Actually, they took advantage of that position to advance towards it and take pictures and place and plant that flag for propaganda purposes. And then they actually quickly withdrew, and, aside from that, it's important to remember this is the first line of advance only. And we saw yesterday in Naura, Ras and Naura, not even There's also UNIFIL headquarters there, and we saw that Hezbollah repeatedly targeting Israeli forces trying to advance there. And then when they would bring a rescue force to come and evacuate the wounded, they would target the rescue force, and that happened at least 4 times. So it's not about the fact that the enemy won't be able to advance, as I said before. It's that how high will the cost be? The enemy is using the elite unit 669 for air evacuation to withdraw its dead and wounded from the border. And what will happen when the forces penetrate deeper into South Lebanon? Will they risk all these rescue operations by helicopter when it's deeper in? I don't know if they will be willing to bring helicopters into the depths because they fear them being falling or being targeted. So evacuation operations, as they advance deeper, are bound to become more difficult. And there are areas like Christian villages that the Israelis taking advantage of by advancing, like towards Ramesh, for example. Hezbollah has taken a decision not to target those areas because there are still residents in those Christian villages, and they want to preserve their lives and the national cohesion and the situation there. So the Israelis are taking advantage of this. They're positioning themselves in some Christian villages because they know that Hezbollah won't target them. So I just wanted to give a brief idea of where we're at, that the Israeli, despite the propaganda, is not having a great time. And with time, we will see where this is going to go and what cost is going to be inflicted on them as this continues.
Everything you just went over, I think, paints a picture of something we already knew, which is that Israel, even them, they knew from the moment they decided to launch this ground invasion, was that they couldn't really make much gains. And even if they did make gains, they were never going to be able to actually hold on to those posts or the land, because in the end, their goal is supposed to be the safe return of tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of settlers, and probably hundreds of thousands now that Kiryat Shimona and Haifa are essentially coming on their daily fire. In any case, something I want us to bring to circle back to is what you mentioned about UNIFIL, the UN interim forces in Lebanon, UN troops from multiple nations that have been deployed in the south of Lebanon for since the 2006 war, as an attempt to implement the much brought up UNSC Resolution 1701 that calls for essentially a demilitarized zone in the south of Lebanon, or just like to keep Hezbollah away from the Israeli border. Israel has been opening fire directly on their positions. UNIFIL for many years here in Lebanon has served almost as an arm to deter Hezbollah, not so much to deter Hezbollah and Israel, just to deter Hezbollah and allow Israel, to continue to do what it has always done. But now they have turned their weapons against them. They yesterday they injured 2 Indonesian, peacekeepers, as they are known. Today, 2 Sri Lankan soldiers. One of them critically. They opened fire on one of their watchtowers. They opened fire on a field hospital near the. When I say they, I mean Israel. On a field hospital near one of the UN headquarters, the UNIFIL headquarters in Aura. It's a free for all, now. What it really feels like is that we're just like a few statements away from the head of the army calling UNIFIL an arm of Hezbollah. That we used to hear about UNRWA, about the UN Refugee Agency for Palestinians, right? Now the UN, they have called the UN a swamp of anti-Semitism. This is what Netanyahu said a few weeks ago. This is just a war on anything and everyone, right? Hezbollah accused Israel of using UNIFIL troops as human shields. They are positioning themselves. They're not only attacking UNIFIL, they're positioning themselves behind UNIFIL so that Hezbollah doesn't attack them. And Hezbollah announced and said, we will not open fire on these Israeli positions of these Israeli units because we do not want to harm UNIFIL. Here that we have one side that is adhering by the rule of law, by the rules of war, and another one that has just, has absolutely no regard for anyone's life at all. And the thing is, when what really, brings this all together is the inaction, as we said at the beginning, from Western governments. And even more so than the inaction, the support that Israel is getting militarily and politically, chiefly from the U.S. government, from the U.S. Embassy in Lebanon, from the State Department, from the White House, and even apparently from the German government, who in the EU has established a veto against a ceasefire in Lebanon. The reports are saying, the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times have had similar reports saying that the Biden White House is essentially opposing a ceasefire. They are telling Israel, do as you will. And we are seeing what that means. We saw the massacre last night. We saw all the massacres you just mentioned across the entirety of Lebanon, the bombing on the shelters, on ambulances, on paramedics, dozens of paramedics killed. Now UNIFIL is getting attacked. Who's next? What's next? Who's gonna, except for Hezbollah, except for the Lebanese resistance, there's absolutely no one that is even lifting a finger to try to stop this. And we're also seeing that reflected in the statements from Lebanese officials. You have the Speaker of Parliament, Nabi Berri, a couple of days ago. He accused the U.S. of saying they want a ceasefire, but doing absolutely nothing. And today, over the past couple of days, you have the caretaker Prime Minister Najib Mikati saying no, or Western allies are actually doing something. There's even this complete disconnect from reality when it comes to the Lebanese officials and what they're talking about.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's obvious that that the U.S. does not want a ceasefire now, and it's obvious that this is that since October 7th, the U.S. has meant the opposite of anything it has said. This is now we have proof of this, especially now that they've come out and made it clear that they want to weaken Hezbollah, and they want the Israelis to keep going because it serves their interest for a greater plan, which again is worth reminding everyone. With or without 7 October, with or without Hamas's commando operation, we were heading to this point, and it's not. Actually, the Qassam Brigade spokesman Abu Ubaidah said during the speech marking the 1 year that this was a preemptive strike, what Hamas did. And that is not new, because at the end of October, the Cradle interviewed Palestinian Islamic Jihad member Ihsan Ataya, and he said we and Hamas had intelligence that Israel was preparing a massive strike on the resistance in Gaza, and this is part of why 7 October, the operation on 7 October was carried out. We won't go into the other reasons now, but my point is the goal for this larger U.S. plan with an Israel properly integrated into the region and normalized with everyone is to eradicate the resistance in Gaza and in Lebanon. So people who still think that this happened because of Hamas or because Hezbollah opened a front, none of that is true. We were heading to this point with or without Operation Al-Aqsa flood specifically. And, from what if they weren't able to, eradicate Hamas until now, I ask our viewers, will they be able to eradicate Hezbollah in your opinion? So this is not, this doesn't rest on one single event that may have changed the course of everything. That everything was headed in this direction either way. It's very important to remember that, and that now they are working to create civil strife in Lebanon, and also to isolate Lebanon from Iran through all this propaganda that's coming out about how Iran was the one who killed Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, and Iran was the one who killed
who gave away Nasrallah's position, blah blah blah.
Yeah, and also we have these local media channels at the same time coming out, like MTV, who is like fully, anti-Hezbollah, and the Gulf pours millions of dollars into it.
U.S. State Department stenographers, MTV. Every country has them.
Exactly. So inciting, basically calling on Israel to bomb areas, shelters and schools where displaced are, by coming out and claiming that, armed Hezbollah members are all over the place. And another, woman coming out and calling on people to target medical personnel because Hezbollah is I don't know what. So we have this concentrated effort to create strife and move and mobilize against Hezbollah. And we haven't talked about it. Maybe we won't get into it this time, but there's the spies and the Israeli that was arrested in Beirut who got deported. And then there are some Syrians who were arrested. And there's these people who come in under the guise of NGO workers or humanitarian workers. And they're also with intelligence agencies. So there's a lot of that going on. And you can go to the Cradle to read about it.
Yeah. Lebanon is facing an open war. It is also facing a covert war. And before we move on to the last thing we want to discuss today, I just want to bring up what the U.S. ambassador to Lebanon said today. She's apparently been telling officials, not just here, but in the region, that to prepare for a post-Hezbollah Lebanon. So if you are wondering why the United States is giving their green light to the massacres here in Lebanon, that's why, because they see a chance for political gain. But as Sima said, this is truly far-fetched, on both the military terms and the political terms, because at the end of the day, there's one aggressor here, and its name is Israel, and the weapons that are being dropped on Lebanese people's heads are coming from the United States. But this also brings us towards the north of Gaza, where we are seeing the campaign to ethnically cleanse this region be pursued to no abandon. We were talking about 400,000 Palestinians being told to leave, and massacres also intensifying in Gaza, with the eyes of the world being in Lebanon now, with good reason. Sadly, Gaza has kind of become, even according to Israeli media, even the Israeli army is now calling Lebanon their main front and Gaza a secondary front. That doesn't mean they have let up at all. So and we also have still clashes in Jabalia camp. The resistance is still strong in Gaza, but it seems that Israel is truly going forward with their final solution.
Yeah, this is the general's plan. The idea to completely empty out the north and exterminate and starve anyone who refuses to surrender. So they think that they can isolate the fighters and then put pressure on Yahya Sinwar. But the thing is, there are hundreds of thousands refusing to evacuate, not only because they don't want to leave their the area, but because they know that nowhere else is safe. And right now in northern Gaza, and Jabalia is under siege, and as you said, the resistance is fighting like the first days of the war. And there's no attention on this, not only because of Lebanon, but because of the anticipated Israeli response to Iran. So this is kind of really the focus where everyone's eyes should be, other than South Lebanon and Lebanon as a whole. This is really the focus. They think they can get away with this. We don't know if the general's plan and this final solution, as you described it, is gonna if they're gonna succeed with this. But this is a very difficult time. We're seeing numbers from the Gaza Ministry of Health like numbers at the beginning of the war. We are seeing bombing like the bombing we saw at the beginning of the war, and we are seeing the resistance fight like it was fighting at the beginning of the war. Jabalia is under siege. Any displaced people or journalists who move are instantly targeted or shot by snipers. The situation is very difficult in northern Gaza, very difficult, and I don't know if they will succeed in emptying out the north, because, as I said, so many people who are living in these barbaric, horrific conditions that we cannot begin to imagine, they're not accepting to leave.
Exactly. And this is all things that we're gonna stay on here at the Cradle. Please make sure to leave a like, to subscribe, to share this video, to follow us on Telegram, on X, and to check our Patreon where you can support our work. We will be coming back to you as soon as we are able. My name is Esteban Carrillo. I have been joined by Sima Itayim.